In some historical periods, after years of strange and sometimes frightening events, no clear answers or explanations have been provided for them. Incidents that remain unsolved not only because of themselves, but also because of why they are still unsolved complicate matters a bit. Even though eyewitnesses, existing evidence, and expert reports were all put together, one thing is still unclear. What really happened at that moment? In this documentary, we look at one of these cases, an event that occurred nearly 2 centuries ago, but its true origin remains unknown. All we know is that in the darkness of the night something appeared and left a mark the likes of which England had never experienced before. So if you're ready, let's get started. February 1855 was one of the coldest winters England had ever experienced. The temperature dropped to -5 degrees, and this unbearable cold lasted from January to March. During this time, successive snowstorms have swept across the country. On February 8th of that year, the people of a quiet, ordinary village in the Middle Dawn region were caught in a storm, just like the previous nights. When they woke up in the morning and left the house to do their daily chores, they didn't know what scene they would encounter. A day that was not like any other day. What they saw before their eyes were strange footprints that stretched from one end of the village to the other. The people of Sheki, suspicious of what they had seen, quickly picked up tools such as sickles and axes and gathered in the center of the village. John Loosemore, a police officer who had heard the commotion, rushed there to find out what had happened. When he arrived, he saw that all this noise was coming from the villagers, but at first he couldn't understand why they were so worried and agitated, because what he saw at first glance looked like the normal footprints of a hoofed animal. For this reason, he turned to the villagers and asked in surprise what was the reason for this commotion. But the villagers pushed him forward with their fists and asked him to follow the path of the footprints. Loosemore began to follow the trail and soon realized exactly what the people were afraid of. The footprints he was following strangely passed through every obstacle and continued on their path without any interruption. For example, when you reached the wall of a building, it would continue on the other side of the building in the same direction. It's as if something has passed through the walls. Loosemore, now realizing the seriousness of the situation, immediately asked those around him for a ladder. He quickly went to the roof of one of the village houses, but what he saw on the roof left his face pale when he came down. He fell into silence for a few moments, then told the crowd in a dry, trembling voice that these footprints had also passed over the roofs of the houses. He even explained that these effects had passed over carts, stalls, and obstacles along the way. It was as if something was moving without regard for any obstacles. Upon hearing these descriptions, a heavy silence fell over the entire congregation. It seemed like a supernatural being had been roaming around this village last night, and the only thing it had left behind were these strange and inexplicable footprints. But the important point here is that the story does not end with this one village. As we mentioned earlier, the early months of 1855 were unusually cold and snowy in England. The southwestern part of the country, including the Don region, was buried under snow for weeks. The rivers of Exeter in this area sometimes overflowed, and rural roads became completely impassable due to storms and snow accumulation, forcing people to stay indoors for days. In such circumstances, around noon on February 9th, unusual calls were received by the Exeter City Police Department. These calls stated that strange and inexplicable footprints had appeared on the snow surface in various parts of the Dull region. As the hours passed, reports began to come in one after another from further south, especially from cities near the coast. Everyone reported the presence of a kind of linear uniform footprint on the snow surface. As the number of reports increased, officials decided to send teams to the villages and surrounding areas to closely investigate where these footprints were actually coming from. Initial assessments revealed that these surface effects covered an area of approximately 160 kilometers. By the evening of that day, police received new reports of the path of these footprints. The route started from the coastal town of Tinos. It had passed through dozens of villages and districts and extended to the Weimar region. According to documentation, these footprints had passed through a total of 30 residential areas. Each track was about 6 centimeters in size and its shape resembled a hoof print. But the strange thing can be considered something beyond their appearance. Contrary to what would be expected from a hoofed animal. Contrary to what would be expected from a hoofed animal, these footprints were not in pairs, but rather in a completely linear pattern, one after the other, imprinted on the snow surface. There was a distance of about 20 centimeters between each work, and these distances continued evenly. This feature led some witnesses to speculate that these footprints were not made by a bipedal creature, but by something with only one point of contact, such as a single leg or even a mechanical structure. But what most intrigued everyone was not just the shape of these footprints, but the path they had taken. Contrary to expectations, no obstacle could stop their movement.
Even in places with steep slopes and angled roofs, the footprints continued in exactly the same order. It seemed that neither high walls, nor deep rivers, nor even dense forests could withstand this mysterious movement. Some reports stated that these footprints entered through the chimneys of houses and reappeared on the roofs of the same houses. Or, for example, in one case, traces were seen at the entrance to a warehouse, then disappeared for a few meters, and then reappeared in the snow at the end of the warehouse. The path of these footprints was neither completely random nor did it simply continue in a straight line. In some areas, they appeared to be moving over a straight line. In some areas, they appeared to be moving away from animal structures such as houses. It was as if an invisible being had deliberately avoided encountering them. But in other places, the footprints were straight towards the person, straight points where they usually are. That is, if they had approached these points with a specific intention or purpose. Following all these events, the police questioned dozens of witnesses and sent forces to various areas to care for these. But heavy snow, they felt that heavy snow that they felt that snake and that the heavy snow that fell in by Sandy, but the heavy snow that fell, the snow that of films you weather. And then the other episode. No. And then the other episode. For this reason, this phenomenon became known in history and among the people of England as the Devil's Footprint. Rumors circulated that the devil had descended from hell to earth on that cold winter night and had wandered through the villages of the country, leaving nothing but these strange footprints. But at the same time, another effort was underway among British researchers and scientists, an attempt to present logical reasons based on scientific and objective evidence, not mythical narratives or people's ways. The first hypotheses that were put forward seemed to be the most logical options. Some experts believe that these footprints were probably made by nocturnal animals, especially animals like raccoons, foxes, or rats that are usually active at night. The reasoning was that when these animals move in the snow, their footprints can look like a uniform, regular line from a distance. Perhaps it is this very feature that has confused people and caused them fear. Some researchers even theorize that these marks may have been made by a jumping animal. For example, an animal that landed on its back with regular jumps instead of walking, which is what caused that particular pattern to form. But all these assumptions, despite their logical appearance, in practice failed to account for all aspects of the incident. Because what people saw wasn't just limited to smooth, open paths. Footprints have appeared in places that were inaccessible even to a human, on high rooftops, next to chimneys, in narrow passages, and even on vertical walls. It was here that minds turned to more unusual options. One of the strangest theories put forward at the time was that the footprints might have belonged to a kangaroo.
This idea may seem ridiculous at first glance, but there are documents and reports that show that in the mid-19th century, kangaroos were illegally imported into some rural areas of England and escaped from the private estates of wealthy people. Some experts have pointed out that kangaroos can hop in regularly spaced paths by hopping on their powerful hind legs. So if such an animal had moved through the area at night, it could have left footprints similar to those seen in the dune. But the problem is that the bitter cold of the 1855 English winter was barely bearable, even for humans. Therefore, the assumption that a runaway kangaroo would survive in such conditions does not seem very convincing. Among the theories put forward, one of the most unexpected hypotheses was put forward by a writer named Jeffrey Hoffs. He believed that the origin of these footprints was neither animal nor supernatural, but rather a completely human and technological phenomenon could have played a role. A military balloon. According to this theory, a military experimental balloon was being stored at a shipyard in the Don region, which went out of control during a night storm. As a result, the balloon floated freely in the sky, and the ropes hanging from it left a uniform and intermittent trail when they hit the snow surface. A trace that could have resembled the footprint of an imaginary or unknown creature. Although this theory could at first glance partially explain the linear and uninterrupted pattern of footprints, it fails on some important points. For example, how could the ropes of a balloon have passed over rooftops, through chimneys, through narrow passages, or even through warehouses and continued again without interruption? Ultimately, none of these theories could provide a complete picture, an image that explains all the strange and unprecedented dimensions of this phenomenon within a logical framework. Nearly 2 centuries later, we still don't know exactly what created those footprints. An animal, an atmospheric phenomenon, a human mistake, or something for our understanding today. Perhaps for some, a scientific and earthly explanation is still the best option. But for many, the only possible explanation is that on that cold winter night, a superhuman being walked through the villages of the Don, leaving nothing but a mysterious silent footprint.